activists make the world better, one person, one action at a time. And we are committed to letting you know about incredible people and organizations out there that are transforming consciousness both personally and collectively through artistic expression. And today, my guest is Ellyzabeth Adler. And she is a multidisciplinary artist herself. She's the executive director and founder of Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble, Performance with a Purpose, which was founded in 2001. So welcome, Ellyzabeth. I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you. Me too.
I'd love to know a little bit about your background and what inspired you to create this dance theater ensemble.
Sure. So I think that goes back to a long time ago when I was just a kid. Growing up, I always loved to dance, and I started taking classes, but I also started playing piano, and I just really wanted to get involved into theater. And so I just always did that as a kid. It was my outlet. It's what I love to do. And my parents, they did a lot of activist work as well. My father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 3 years before I was born, and he was also a Marine. And my parents, growing up, they did a lot of fighting for the American with Disabilities Act, which I know just recently celebrated an anniversary. And they also fought to have his MS covered under the Veterans with Disabilities Act, because there was a doctor who started linking PTSD with MS. And so I grew up, understanding what you had to do in order to make a change in this world. And even as like a high schooler, I went to a Lutheran high school, and there, we had a lot of social justice classes. And so you got to learn about, what was going on in the world around you and how it was important not to just sit back and do nothing, because that's how the problems usually start. And after high school, I took some time and I danced ballet. And then when I went to college, as I like to say, I fell in love with somebody who basically changed me for the rest of my life, and not necessarily in a good way. I ended up in a dating abuse relationship for almost a little under 3 years, and that really changed me. It changed the art that I create. It just changed my perspective and my viewpoints, because I had to do a lot of thinking about, well, why did this happen? And anytime you start asking yourself, why did something happen, you start to grow as a person, especially if you can move beyond the hurt and into hope and healing. And so over the years, in college and in undergrad and grad school, I just started learning more about multidisciplinary work and learning about the artists Pina Bausch and Martha Clark, and just was amazed by how they incorporated dance and theater. And I started learning more about grotesque and like the political theater, and I really realized that that's what I wanted to do. So 15 years ago, I did an adaptation of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and that poem was written right after World War I, and it was really talking about the destruction of humanity. And to me, it was one of the most beautiful pieces of poetry I've ever read in my life. And so I adapted it to a 45-minute performance. And yeah, that's how we got started. And through the years, people have really been following the work that we've done, and it's been really wonderful.
Wow, that's a totally inspiring story, and I love how you've taken your challenges and you share them. I know one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you was because you actually just did a piece on domestic violence not too long ago. So can you just tell people a little bit about that, and talk about your creative process as you are, as you say, you're an ensemble group, and people need to know about the collaborative process that you go through.
Sure. So for Bindis and Bruises, it started about 2 years ago when I was assistant teaching a class at Columbia College, and one of the students there was a grad class. Her and I started talking because she was Indian, and found out that her home in India was near the girls' orphanage that I had taught at while I was spending some time in India. So that just struck up a conversation. And then we just started talking about, like dating, and, I had dated somebody that was Indian, and we started talking about the cultural things of dating somebody who is from an Indian background with like the mother-in-law and all that, the food and just a lot of stuff. And as her and I just started talking more, I realized that we had a lot in common with the different people that we had dated as well. And when Jyoti Singh, who they now call India's daughter, was brutally raped and tortured and murdered, that really affected her. And she started talking to more women, and everybody's like, oh, that's something happens in India. That's something that happens in India. And the more she started talking to friends of hers of all different backgrounds, she started realizing that, no, this is really happening here in America. And that is when she brought to me this idea that she wanted to do a show that was about this topic. And that's when I told her about my experience in college, because up until this time, I hadn't really gone public about the abusive relationship that I was in, but I also didn't really keep it silent. So friends of mine knew, my family did not know. And so when she brought this to me, that's when I decided it was time for me to break my silence. And so I started talking publicly, just even through Facebook, about my experience. And there was a lot of women who said, wow, this also happened to me, or, I knew you at that time. I didn't know that this was going on. So we started slowly gathering stories of women, and we started looking at statistical backgrounds. And so the next step then was to bring it to the Ensemble, the group that we work with, and it started just simply doing workshops with about 4 people and getting feedback about, okay, yes, this story works, or this story, we need a little bit more action in it to make the story be told better. And so we worked about 3 months on it, and then we took a break, and myself and my writing partner, Maren Rosenberg, we went back and worked on the script along with Priya and figured out where we could put dance in it, figured out how we wanted to bring some factual statistics that, like, for instance, like 1 out of 3 women are raped. Okay, how do we say that with not necessarily having one person say that, right? And so we decided to come up with a character, Dr. Sita, who the story is a bit about her journey, but it weaves the story together of these 4 other women. And it starts with her being a therapist now, and how when she goes and talks to women, they don't really believe her that she's had these struggles, right, until she starts opening it up. And then it goes through the different women that she has met, including a mother-in-law who is verbally abusive to her daughter-in-law. And the daughter is pregnant, and when she sees her son hit her daughter-in-law, that's when she's realized that she's been part of the problem. So the scene that followed after that was a physical theater moment in which we talked about the cycle of abuse. And so we were able to depict that. And that part, for instance, that came up in rehearsal, just talking about, well, how do we tell this part of the story? We know we have this fact, so how do we do this? After we had a scene in which there was a talk about rape, and we wanted to show the fact about 1 out of 3 women are raped, we had a cast of 9. And so it was a very simple thing that we did, is that all 9 of them walked with their backs to the audience, and then every couple of steps, 1 woman dropped, and then another woman dropped, and another woman dropped, so that you saw 1 out of 3 for the fact. And then then we added text to it, and it was something simple, just calling out the rapist. And so, for instance, this one girl said, I was 5 years old and he was an uncle. Another person said, it was my first date in high school and he raped me. And then somebody else said, I don't know what happened. I was drugged. And so that was a very simple way to get across that 1 out of 3 women are raped. And so
did you work with any
yeah.
therapists as you were doing this?
We did. What we did, because this topic is something that could trigger many people's thoughts, what we did was, once we got together the script, and we also pulled these facts from, from like the now the National Organization of Women, and other, very factual places. So we really made sure that all the facts and the stats were accurate, so that we had that down. And once we had the script together, we did send it over to one therapist. He also came in and he watched it. And then we brought in, when we had the script more developed in the movement, we brought in a dance movement therapist who then watched the show, and she said, okay, so the therapist, for instance, would say this and not that, so that was a really great way. And then during the 6-show run, we had people from the Rape Advocacy Center on staff every night. So in case anybody
did you have talkback sessions with each one of these then?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Did you have talkback sessions afterwards?
We did. Not after every show. The last weekend we did, but every single show we were available for informal talks. And that was the other reason why we had the Rape Advocacy Center there, so that they could pass out information.
I know for myself, I talk on being sexually abused as a child. So when I've done things, people are always coming up to me afterwards and, oh, thank you for sharing your story. I am so glad I'm not alone. And somebody always is disclosing. So I think it's really important when you have such an impactful piece that you do have somebody from an agency who is able to work with somebody who may be triggered at that moment. So, and also provide, the factual information. Here's who to reach out to. Here are hotline numbers if you need it, that kind of thing. So I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Even through the course of sharing what we were doing online as part of the social media buildup, someone who is gay sent us in a letter about his experience of being a gay man, and he never called it abuse until we started putting out some information. And we actually shared that in the play because...
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, because men are affected as well. So I believe the statistic is 2 out of 5 gay men are involved in abusive relationships.
Right, and 1 out of 6 young men are sexually abused. So it's there.
Right.
You can't. At one point, it was only a women's issue, but it is a human issue, and that's
is a human issue, right?
It is a human issue, and I'm so glad that you're working on this. I want to go back a little bit more to your organization and where you are and some of your challenges that you've been facing. I mean, 'cause you're 15 years into it, and so people need to know, oh, these are what things happen at 15. It's very different the first 5 years, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's, because I was 26 years old when I started the organization, a lot of things have changed administratively, but also me as a leader has really changed. And this wasn't an organization that I took over. This was something that I founded. So as a result, my growth as a leader is directly involved with the growth of the company, And so in my 15 years as a leader, when you're first starting out, you ask a lot of questions, and, as much as you are confident, you're also very insecure about some other things as well, And then being 26 years old, I was still working through a lot of the effects of being involved in an abusive relationship, And like I said, I never wanted, though, to put that work up on stage because it was too personable. And then also through the course of this, my father passed away a couple of years, like 7 years ago now. And so that, was like, okay, I need to step away a little bit, but the company still needs to keep going, And, but what's, I guess the beauty is, as coming up out of that, is that you really do realize that this is what you want to do for a living and how do you make it happen, right? And so my leadership skills, too, have grown stronger as well as I've become more confident in my artwork, as I've become just more grounded as an artist as well, because one of the biggest things that I've had to learn as an artist is you're going to have good reviews, you're going to have bad reviews, you're going to have people like your work, you're going to have people hate your work. But you have to love your work, and your audience can't just be for someone who's 25. It can't just be for someone who's 60. It has to be for a multitude of people. So you have to be able to communicate that. So my leadership skills have changed, and my growth as an artist has really changed over the last 15 years.
So
from an organizational point of view, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so from an organizational point of view, things that have really changed is, there's always this thing. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist, and in it, Paulo Coelho talks all the time about beginner's luck, right? And then you have struggle, and then you have to reground yourself in what it is that you believe your purpose is. And
right.
I think about that from an organizational point of view, because there is a lot of beginner's luck when you're first starting out. Like, people are like, oh, yeah, this is so great. You're young, you can do this and that. And we don't have all the responsibilities we do. And so you just start working, right? And you work nonstop and everything. And so when we first started out, it was a little bit easier. And then when you start realizing, okay, how am I going to keep paying for this? How is this going to happen? And you have to learn about grants, right? And you have to learn about funding. And, I started the company in 2001, and we all know what happened in 2001, and, 9/11 happened. And, we had economic downturns. And so you had to understand how to be fiscally responsible, how to set up partnerships at places that you work, right? So that you can have affordable rehearsal space. And we also work with 5,000 kids a year now. In our first year in 2000.
Okay, well let's stop for one second, because I want to talk about Kids Project and the Teen Artist Project.
Sure.
So let's make that transition right now so people know what we're talking about.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so our arts educational programs, every year we work with, we're now closing out this year with working with about 5,000 children. And we work with preschool through adults with developmental disabilities, so all through high school, all through middle school. And we provide before school, during the school day, and after school, and then summer programming as well. And we teach dance, we teach theater, and we teach visual arts. And we really bring
Why do you think that's so important? Why don't you tell people why you think that's important?
Sure. Well, I'll totally tell you. So we also bring in the arts integration. So, for instance, one of our big programs is Books Alive. So we'll read a book with the kids, and then we'll have them dance it out. We'll have them act out or do a visual art project. And we really bring in also the third, because it's a triangle. So we've got the performing and visual arts, we've got the academic studies, plus our base in social emotional learning. And that's really why this is important, is because some kids can learn through tactile. They learn through doing, right? The kinesthetic awareness. And bringing in the social emotional learning. So it's getting kids to think about things from other points of view. It is getting them to have their self-esteem boosted. It is getting them to understand what failure is and not to be afraid of it, so that they can work on it a little bit harder and get that grit. And grit is the new buzzword now, but the artists have always known this, that you have to do multiple things through repetition, and that's how you get your grit, And so all of that is really important. But then plus what it does for after-school programs is the most dangerous hours for a kid is after school. because parents are usually still at work and they need somewhere to go, you know. And so in after school programming, you know, we're providing them enrichment. We're providing them a place to just talk, or providing them a place to just be kids, especially, you know, with No Child Left Behind, there is this whole teaching for the test. And so what the arts do is it allows kids to just be kids and to be creative, you know. And to have them play dress up, you know, to have them paint, to have them learn about dance, and to have them create their own dances, you know, all of those things are the reason why we do what we do.
I love it. So I want to ask you, so what's your vision for the future? What's the legacy you'd like to leave?
That's a very good question. Ironically, we are starting a strategic plan for the next 5 years and going into our infrastructure. Because part of that is, and this is where I was talking earlier about my growth as a leader for the organization, is talking about legacy, and that I want the company to continue, even if for some reason I'm not around, right? And so this past year, we've brought in an artistic director who can help create performance work, but then also work with our arts education programs in the classroom, right? So, I mean, our legacy is that, one, I hope the company keeps going on for another 15 years and another 15 years after that, you know. But I hope that when people come and see our shows, that they walk away a bit changed, whether it's getting them to think about something, maybe just even to strike up a conversation about this, or maybe a news article will come across their desk and they'll read about this, you know. We've also done work around veterans issues. We've done work around women's rights. And people that come to see our shows sometimes are people that have experienced this. And so they will share that, hey, these are everything I wanted to say about my experience. I just didn't have the words to say it, you know. And as far as the kids in our program,
how do you think that creates social change,
yeah,
when people see their stories up there, or they finally can tell share their stories?
Sure. Well, I think that it makes them feel like they're not alone.
Right.
And, you know, it makes them feel like they have, that there's something, and, you know, because a lot of times, like, even, I mean, we've done a piece about gentrification, you know, and even that piece, you know, people talking about what they're seeing in their neighborhoods and they're having to say goodbye, you know. So these are all the things that, you know, we hope that when people come see our work, that they'll think about that. And with the kids, you know, we always talk about this breaking the cycle. And as a friend told me once, you know, when working with kids, we plant seeds and we water seeds with kids. So hopefully, you know, maybe the boost of self-esteem will make them make a different choice down the line. Or maybe, you know, if they're struggling with, you know, reading or other literacy components, that maybe that they'll have a boost of self-esteem, and so that they'll think, well, you know what, I actually was able to understand this, and maybe I just learned differently, you know. So it's our hope that everybody will just be able to start thinking, and thinking is what creates consciousness, right? And then that consciousness is what creates change.
Love it. So I want to ask you about your own creative process, and what do you do when you get stuck? Is there a tip or something you want to share with anybody?
When I get stuck, that's a good question. I think I do a couple different things. One, I know that creativity cannot be forced, but then sometimes you have deadlines, right? So what do you do? So for me, you know, walking or running really helps, because it helps my body get unstuck, as I like to say. I still take dance classes, and so for some reason going to that will possibly inspire something, you know. Reading, talking to other people. especially if I'm in the rehearsal process, and something's stuck. A lot of times what I will do is I will bring in a trusted colleague and have them watch part of the show and talk through some things, and also be really open for feedback. Really be open to what is not working in the show, because even if it's something that, like, you can say, yes, I really want that in there, and they're like, well, it's not coming across. You have to be able to defend it, but you also have to be able to go, yeah, even though I really like this, part of the show, maybe it's not reading, and maybe I just have to, like, let that go. What we find a lot of times is when we're workshopping stuff, because we'll like for Bindies, for instance, we worked on the summer, and then we had a couple months break, and then we came back. What I found was a few things that we worked in the workshop didn't work for the final performance, because we had a cast of 10 now, as opposed to when we were workshopping it, we had a cast of 4. So I had to think about those things. And so you have to be able to let go, and, I've had ideas for other shows in the past or other concepts that, I've ended up using it somewhere else down the line. So I think
I'm curious, just
yeah.
as an I love Twyla Tharp's book on creativity, and and she has boxes
that's a really
and
good
stuff
one.
like
yeah.
that. And so I was just curious, what do you do when you have all these ideas? Do you put them in a journal? Do you put them on a whiteboard? What do you do with them?
So it changes all the time. I do journal. I do write stuff down. Because I'm a very visual learner, I think that's why walking or running helps me, because it's getting that creative idea out, and I literally will be running down the street or walking or biking, and epiphany, an idea, and I'll just start visually seeing how something will lay out, and then I bring that into meditation sometimes, where sometimes I just sit and do nothing and allow the thoughts to come to me, and then, this is a thought that's really sticking, so I'll write it down. I do love doing, like, the whole whiteboard thing and just writing down a whole bunch of crazy ideas, especially once I bring in fellow collaborators, right? And we draw a picture, and it's like, okay, what's the big idea? And then it's like, okay, well, what about a scene about this? What about this? What about that? And that's always fun to me, because then it's like, okay, I'll take all those ideas back and I'll put it into some sort of order or something,
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. So we're running out of time. I wish we could talk for another hour, but I'd love people,
Sure.
why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you and find out more about your dance theater?
Yeah, sure. So people can visit our website, which is dancetheatre.org. That's DANZTHEATRE.org. You can email me through the website as well, and you can totally find us on Facebook. It's just Chicago Dance Theater, and you can find our YouTube page from there and our Instagram account. Just find us on the Facebook and social media, and come see one of our shows.
I love it. So thank you so much. And this is Ray Luskin, and I just want to suggest a few things for you before you get off the call tonight, or to spend some time writing down what ideas did you get from listening, because Ellyzabeth was a wealth of information and ideas were flowing. So what could you take today and apply it in your own life, and how can you use what she said to make your own creative dreams come true? I want to also remind you that creative activism is for everyone. We all are, I believe, we're all innately creative. Sometimes we have to find a way to tap into it, but when we do and we apply it we can apply it in every area of our life and transform the world around us as well. So please spend a little time with your own creative activism today. This is Ray Luskin, the Creative Activist.